I'm here joined, very delighted to be joined by Chris Jennings, who's a lot of experience in player development, Chris. And we're going to go into that in quite some detail today. As you know, player development, we talk about this off camera, very close to my heart. You know, everything that I see that the developments in football broadly. I always personally bring it always back to youth development. How does that impact youth development and player development? I know that's probably very close to your heart too in terms of your career, but I know you've had a lot of success in high school winning teams, as well as your own kind of entrepreneurship journey, as well as kind of coaching and MLS links. I guess, Chris, who is Chris Jennings? Tell us about your background on kind of journey in soccer. You know, playing. You obviously played to a good level too, and obviously coaching is kind of where you've made your name and your career for the past 20 years or so.
Sure. So thanks for having me on, Andy. Really passionate as well about player development. I've been impressed with your guys' organization with Project Footballer and We Make Footballers. Very, very respected over in the UK and happy to have you guys, here in Florida where you are, but in the US as a whole. So thanks for having me. I kind of started my journey up in New Jersey, actually, playing as a youth. I was fortunate enough to kind of grow up in a hotbed of talent in our area. So I was fortunate to, be able to look up to the likes of John Harkes and Tab Ramos and Tony Miola, guys that were U.S. national team kind of legends or becoming legends were sort of in my backyard in New Jersey. So um, I went and played in college in Pennsylvania at York College. I got injured, was kind of messing around doing things that most college kids shouldn't be doing. And my coach, I guess, thought I had a decent eye and brain for the game. So pulled me aside and kind of helped steer me into coaching, gave me some responsibilities, going and looking at opponents, doing some scouting, looking at players. And then when I came back, having to, present my own work and helping with session plans and helping even just pick up cones and understand how the different flow of sessions and what they were trying to achieve. So that kind of steered me into some coaching, both when I was in college and then right when I got out. I ended up at DC United, where I was doing things with the front office in youth soccer. And then also off the field. I'm sorry, on the field with different camps and clinics and summer type opportunities in the off season. So, yeah, well, kind of interesting being able to be in an organization that was growing. Um, you were required to kind of do everything, So being able to kind of see how the community, helping players in the community, helping then fill the seats for a first team and trying to establish a culture, a footy culture that really never existed before in the US. So that's something that I think over the last 30 years has come a long way. Um, but I think there's a lot to be said, though, for the different stages of youth development in our country. And now, in order for us to be serious, we have to kind of take the next steps, I feel like. So, uh, I've been in the high school game for a while now, coaching. Um, ran some clubs, youth clubs, both on the boys' side, and then as sort of, holistically kind of looking at player development from a younger age, looking at, kind of how it relates to the education in the brain, how that kind of, how does it relate to our game? How does it relate to how you talk to kids? How you, if you're asking a 6-year-old to pass, why? Because their brains are not wired to give away their favorite toy, and if we can make the ball their favorite toy, we've won half the game. So yeah, that's kind of just a little bit about me. I have a lot of experience in all different facets, I guess, of player development. It's really a passion of mine. I'm very blessed to have 3 young kids of my own, and it's kind of neat being able to kind of. I've had 20 years, I guess, or 20 plus some years of experience with a lot of other folks' children, and they've been fortunate enough to be in my path, which has helped me with my own kids. And it's been a blessing to kind of see that just developing people as well along the way, just how the game kind of links and brings people together, brings communities together. So it's just I enjoy the developing part of the beautiful game, really. So
Yeah, nice. Because I think you've got so many different vantage points in your career of very different levels and kind of team culture and stuff, which we're going to tap into in some of these questions. What would you say has sort of influenced or what kind of shaped your coaching philosophy? What's kind of what's been the kind of highlights? Where do you kind of, where's your pillars of success, I guess, for you as a coach personally, and obviously then coaches that I'm sure you've mentored yourself during your career?
Sure. I've always just enjoyed football as an art, really. I think to me, a good team, when you're looking at it from a vantage point, it kind of looks like water to me, kind of looks like waves crashing and different things. It's sort of a beautiful thing that been able to kind of draw experience from different communities, different people that have kind of maybe seen the game in different lenses. Um, Growing up, being in New Jersey, there was a big kind of like a Scottish root there, where I grew up. Um, but there was also sort of a Central American kind of influence as well. I always had sort of I was drawn to Johan Cruyff really from a young age and the idea of total football. So when I was at DC United, I was kind of really fortunate to be able to be there at the same time as an Ajax legend, Sonny Saloy, and he and I would share lunch sometimes and share ideas and different things like that. And he kind of opened my brain a little bit just to some of the ideas with the Dutch with passing and just sharing the ball and different movements. And um, I also spent a lot of time with a former Scottish international, a Dundee United Hall of Fame player that kind of opened a little bit of my eyes to just like you have the vision of how you want to play, but then being able to teach it. The idea of total football is great, but then how do you break it down to where all of your players can make those decisions, but see the bigger picture as well? So, I'm also married to a Peruvian, so I have some South American, flavor, I guess, if you will. So, I really do enjoy honestly the beautiful game. For me, I love having the ball, love dominating people with and without the ball, but it's more or less just getting a group of guys really together to believe in something and how they want to go about achieving it and getting them to believe in each other. And for me, it's such a global thing. So yeah, I think being able to pick and draw from different kind of the Dutch ideas, the Spanish ideas, the English ideas, the I just think, and then if you can take that and then mold it into the whole American idea of optimism, like you had mentioned before, of like hard work, I think we could have something here in this country. So
Yeah, and let's build on that because I know we were talking about it a bit off camera as well. I often get a question now being out in the States myself. I often get a question for people and say, when's the US men's national team gonna win a World Cup or wherever it might be. And for me, as much as I'm not necessarily so interested in, I mean, I'm focused on youth development, but I always say, and I always fall back to it. I said, you have to start the foundations. That's where it all starts. I guess um, how have you seen the American landscape, youth soccer landscape evolve over the past 10 years, perhaps specifically with all these other influences? Obviously, there's been a lot of investment in the sport here in the US and it's getting bigger and bigger, which is a great thing, the men's and the women's game. Women obviously have had a lot of success their own right at the very top level and long time before the men really. But how do you see all those influences shaping the US and where are the opportunities and gaps still do you see from that last 10 years? And we'll go on to how it's evolving later. But yeah, how's the 10 past years evolved for US soccer, I guess, in terms of the youth side of it?
sure, I think whether for better or for worse, it's become big business. Um, for better, there's a lot more kids playing. I came up in a time where there was maybe one travel team for each sort of town area. So you had to be amongst the best 20 players from where you sort of lived. Now, at least where I am in the DMV area, I'm in Northern Virginia, there's kind of a club on every corner, and each club kind of has two, three, and four teams. Then they have a whole recreational side. So the good part, there's a lot more kids with the opportunity to play, and that's amazing and fantastic. I think we do a pretty good job in this country with our younger groups. I think there's not a whole lot difference really between an American player, nines through 12s, and then maybe a player throughout the rest of the world. But I do think some of the foundations in the development piece of it, in terms of, I mean, really scanning decision making, awareness. I think the foundations of those that are being taught in the rest of the world are severely lacking here. Because you're also sort of battling a culture. We're very much on our phones, head down, reels, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Um, in order to play our game, you have to be extremely aware of your surroundings and make decisions quickly. And if your head's down and you're preoccupied, it's very hard to do that. So I think there's a lot of things from a foundational level that we're missing, but in terms of the quality of our players, or maybe that's the wrong word, the skill of our players, I think they're very skillful up until 12, 13, 14. But then I think there's a huge gap. So
Mhm. And it's interesting because I was at a tournament here in Florida quite recently over a weekend, a youth competitive tournament, and the quality was mixed. Skill level was mixed. They all played competitively. There was a big strong will to win, but there was some outstanding players on show. Outstanding players, and a lot of the measurement I have is from pre-academies in the UK. So it kind of comes from a fairly okay set of eyes, I'd say. But the quality was there. You mentioned that gap you've got. What's causing that gap, do you think, in the US, and how do we bridge it? How do we make sure that players, and this is another question I'll come on to in a second, is how do we make sure that players are getting to a level, an outstanding elite level at the age of 16, 17, 18 to be able to compete with, because, I'll come into it. I have so many questions to ask. I talk to people about, the traditional American sports, right? American football, basketball, baseball, and the kind of players typically will get to the pro level at an older age than you would typically see in soccer around the world. So, i.e., if a soccer player evolves into an elite level player, they're usually playing pro by 18. Yeah, at the very, very top level. Doesn't mean you can't go older, but generally speaking. So where is that gap? Because is that the critical gap, do you think, that could see the US really level up, at kind of a professional level and a kind of national level, international level? And what's the solution? What ideas have you got with that side of it?
well, I think there's a lot of factors to it, to be fair. When our players get to a high school aged, so 14, 15, there's a lot of different distractions available to them.
Yeah.
Whereas in a lot of places, your top players they're living together for the most part. They're eating meals together. They're in an environment that's more controlled, I guess, but more conducive to their end goal. Whereas our players, if their end goal is the same, their environment is a disaster compared to their competition overseas. So I do think that there's more clubs that are trying to create that environment. Um, I think it's different though than just, eating the right things, sleeping well, drinking well, and all those. I think there's a big piece of genuinely a lack of awareness, and togetherness. We're very quick to, they've instituted an NIL and transfer portals and all these types of things here in our system that have become very individualized. Um, and I'm not saying that there's not a place for those things, but traditionally you used to come up and with regards to college soccer, it was okay, I need to make a good decision here because it's 4 years of my life. I'm in so and so's investing in me. Is the environment right? Is the coaching staff, do they help promote their players on after that? How do they look after their players? Now it's, well, can I go there for 6 months and then use that to then push me somewhere else? And then so I get that there's a place for that. I'm just not so sure that that's 14 or 15, when we don't really have enough first team environments in this country to be able to pull the best 15 and 16-year-olds into there to humble them. Because right now, the best 15 and 16-year-olds here have been told how good they are from such a young age, and they've got thousands and thousands of Instagram followers and all types of stuff, but they've not really done anything yet. I think it's sort of in a way, a similar parallel to giving so many players at a young age a huge contract. You run a lot of risks to that. Um, but I think that there's genuinely not enough first team environments here and not enough folks that are out for the kids. Um, Need to put egos aside, money aside, and all that aside and look after people. And if you can help place the kids in the right environments, I think that we can help solve that problem. But um, we have to get away from you know, Instagram reels and highlights and things like that, and more about like what makes teams and people successful. And a lot of that is suffering and sacrifice. It's not about me, me, me. So I think we need to get back to that.
Yeah, let me pick up on one of those points you mentioned because it's been a sort of a running thing that's been mentioned a few times. Geographically, the US has challenges, in terms of the size of the country. There's obviously so many MLS teams. USL is now getting a lot of money pumped into it by the sounds of it, and that's going to be a great thing, I think, for youth pathways and community clubs being set up. And obviously there'll be some challenges, no doubt, but I think that'll be good. But right now you have an issue where the nearest academy for where I'm based is Orlando City. I know Jose, who runs the academy there, and he spoke about the challenge that he faces with the various age groups. Is that the level you have to travel very, very far to compete at a high level. And I spoke to him about, would one day does he think that we would see kind of U7, U8, U9, Orlando City Academy elite teams like you see in the UK, like you see in Spain, like you see in, in the Netherlands, Germany, where, there's the players are being scouted from the age of 6, rightly or wrongly, that's when they're being scouted. They're being picked up at that time, and then they're in an elite environment very, very early. And it gives Although I do see a lot of talented US children at the age of 12, 13, when typically they're picked up now by the clubs here, the top clubs, it does give them an unfair advantage in some ways because they've been training at such a high level. But you're talking about UK, tiny country geographically. Children can go and compete at a very high level within a half an hour drive away. The US teams have got to travel interstate. How do we solve that? Is it just a matter of it needing time for more clubs to develop at a higher level and then to be able to compete? And then naturally we might see the age groups come down, or are you against that idea of younger children competing at that very elite tense environment? What's your take on how we
See,
solve that problem? Is it just too difficult to do it with the size of country?
well, I think there's a place for all of that to exist because you're right in that the size of the country is a hindrance, but it could also be a strength. And that's the thing that we've not captured yet, because in my view, there should be probably enough for 4 or 5 regional pools of players that should be at a high enough level where I mean, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to put out the talent, that France does. I mean, look at look at the size of France every year compared to the size of the US. But I think, see, I'm in the DMV area where I am, and then when I grew up in New Jersey, there's a club on every corner. So for instance, I hear you. I was part of a national league and setting one up at one point, and we were the first club in Virginia, and our region spanned from Virginia up to Massachusetts. So, we would go up to Boston, you would fly, however many hours and play one game and then fly back, and it's kind of crazy, right? So, well, then we tried to create, a that national league, but more regionally based to loosen up the travel. Then you run into different seasons of play, like with high school and different things. And we would go from Virginia down to the Carolinas for games. There's hours, 4 to 6 hours difference in the car. You could span most of the state of where we are, 4 to 6 hours, and get, a billion games in a day. So, but to your point, to get that elite level, highest level, would you really need to go that far? Maybe sometimes yes, depending on geographically. I think the investment from USL, I think, is going to help because they have done a really nice job of going into some other markets that maybe MLS is not in, or other markets that need exactly what we're talking about. They need a proper football setup. They're starving for 5, 6, 7 year olds that love the game. Where do we go? Um, but also too, you have to remember like some of the best players in the world grew up playing in the street off of a curb with their uncles. So, we have the resources here, we have a whole lot of things here, and we're still not producing the best player. So, I think environment opportunity is a huge piece of it, and we just have to get kids playing. And by that even, I think them playing at the size fields that they're on, sevens and nines, it's way off. But
Yeah.
it's crazy.
I have a daughter who plays competitive and she's U9. And I mean she's a relatively modest size U9. She does her best, but Goodness me, it's a challenge for children. There's some children who are just pure athletes, they're just fine. But a
Mhm.
lot of children are struggling. But that's a conversation for another day. Um, Talk to me a bit about Next Level Football, Chris, and what you started there over 10 years ago now. I know a lot of your focus is on player development there. And tell me about how that evolved, what your plan was, and obviously you've done a great job keeping it, doing a great thing for such a long time in the area you're based. Tell me about Next Level Football.
Sure. Yeah, it was really I had left the professional game and I wanted to do something in the area. I wanted to be able to train players and help them. And kind of like you had said before with how we make footballers kind of started, it didn't matter the level of player. At first, it was really just if anyone wants to learn the game, let us teach you, let us show you, let us help you. We would do camps and clinics out of one of the private schools that I coach at. And then to be fair, that's where we still are today. We've done a lot of work out of there, indoors and outdoors. But yeah, we run camps, clinics in the summer for youth kids, but throughout the year, we really try to help individuals with more like IDP style training. We look at kind of what they need specifically and construct either mostly small group sessions, but put together different game related actions to what they need specifically based on their IDP. So we have guys that come in that I've been fortunate enough to coach that are maybe out of state or a few are in residencies at MLS programs right now. And then when they come back for the summer, for the winter, we get together and do work. So it's kind of evolved a little bit into more that I have stepped out of the club side. It's more evolved into how can I help players individually either place them or develop them, or some players we have that are maybe in between trials or in between teams. They'll come in and get some work with us and our coaches. So that's kind of where we've been at the last few years.
Nice. And you mentioned a kind of a nearby where you are. It's a club on every corner. We had someone speak with us recently who said he felt there was too many clubs in his part of the US. He felt there was too many clubs, and actually that was becoming a problem. Um,
Mm.
do you see similar companies to yourself who get up and running, probably some that come and gone? A lot of one-to-one coaches that we see in the UK as well as I'm seeing in the US as well here, and a lot of clubs going on. Do you see that kind of competition being a good thing for soccer development and player development, or do you see it as a hindrance? Are we kind of just diluting the quality of what we do? Because you mentioned before it's a business in the US, very much so. And how do you manage that side of what you do and focus on player development still? And do you think around your area there's potentially too many clubs or no?
You know, I I genuinely think if there's more kids playing, fantastic. And I think as well, the best players have to prove that they are the best in multiple different environments. So I think it's good when guys go and train outside of their club with multiple, either it be small groups or whether it be an individual, or sometimes they just go out and train with a buddy or what have you. I think it's fantastic. And I think the more the merrier, to be honest, because at the end of the day, the guys that are out just to maybe make money or to try to, run a camp to a quick hit or something like that, they get found out. The ones that are in it for the kids, the ones that are in it that really help develop players and help them throughout their journey. Um, I mean, it's a beautiful piece of life, you know. Unfortunately, I had some health issues a few years ago. I'm lucky to honestly be here with you today. I had four life-saving surgeries from 2022 into 2023. And some of the players that I've been fortunate to work with, they were maybe 8, 9 years old when they first started, and now they are, you know, preparing for professional trials and things like that, and they still come back and they still talk to you and they still try to ask for advice and they still keep up with you. And I think that for me is the most beautiful part of football, really, is the whole life cycle of it. Um, so for me, yeah, I think the more the merrier. I think we are in an area too of the country where we have a lot of folks that have had experience internationally and they're able to come back and share that. It just makes our community stronger. It makes our community better. So I quite like right now there's a lot of young um coaches that were former players that have just stopped playing and they're doing a lot of training and things like that. Are they going to make mistakes just like we all did? Absolutely. But if they're genuinely out to help create more players, I am all for it.
Mm. And talk to me, Chris. Obviously, amazing to hear about the surgeries you had. I'm glad it's gone well. Um,
All good.
talk to me a bit about when you have parents that approach you with next level football, or maybe parents who are just getting into the game. Perhaps they've not come from a soccer background themselves. Maybe they've had themselves kind of more of a traditional American sport. What advice do you give them about player development and what sort of environment they should ensure their children are coming to you? Whether they perhaps work with you year round or maybe they just work with you for part of the year. What sort of things are you telling parents to be mindful of when it comes to player development? Kind of maybe the red flags at clubs or coaching programs, and what the things that they should be kind of really focused on to ensure their child gets the best environment to work with and consistent, I guess.
Sure. I think the biggest piece that we discuss with them is to try to look at it like an education. That doesn't mean that everyone that has that education turns out to be a brilliant, doctor or physicist or something, but each and everyone that goes through that education can find the best version of themselves, right? And can be the best person that they can be. So we genuinely look at it as an education. And I'll try to speak to them about, look, if you're in an environment where your child is 6 or 7 years old and the coach is always telling them to pass and get rid of the ball, maybe have a think about how that impacts your child. They need touches on the ball. I mean, like, we kind of try to help them meet their child where they're at. So if you're talking about an 8-year-old, it's different than if you're speaking about a 15 or 16-year-old. It's also different based on what level they are, what dreams they have, what goals they have, but also one of the biggest things that I've been able to kind of break through with some parents. We're in a very well-off to do area in the DC, Maryland, Virginia region here. A lot of players and families, they like the idea of being a professional. They like the idea of playing collegiately, but they're not necessarily willing to do what it takes to do all those things. So I think someone being honest and real to, especially the older players, once you get to be maybe 13, 14, 15, I would consider that an older player because at that stage, you're either decided really, are you playing for fun or are you playing because you want to try to become something? Um, I think having that conversation is very valuable. Not to say that if they say, I don't want to become a that's fine. But then the environment then that they will thrive in. Because if you're constantly beating someone over the head and they don't want that, or their parent is maybe the reason that they are there, not necessarily themselves, it's not good for anyone. So I think just having that conversation, and some kids will be late bloomers and realize I can maybe do something with this. We have players that come through our program that, we focus a lot on critical thinking and vision awareness and scanning and being able to make decisions under pressure. And some of the boys, when they develop physically at a later age, they just blossom. And we've had guys that were maybe not so much on the recruiting path that are now playing and contributing as freshmen. Um, and that's just, I think, a testament to the work that they put in. So I think having that conversation, it sort of draws that line in the sand where how much are you willing to work? Because if you're willing to work, we can give you whatever it is that you need. That's not saying that it would be the same outcome, but we will give you whatever it is that you need to be the best you. And if you want to play because you want to have fun, you want to get better, you want to train with your friends, that's fine too, and that environment is available to you. So I just think it's all about meeting the players where they're at. But yeah,
Yeah, nice. I like that education piece. It's a perfect segue to talk to you about your experience with high school soccer. Obviously you've done a lot of work and still do in that side, building winning teams and working with that age group we've kind of touched upon a few times. Talk to me about how you build a winning team as a high school soccer coach, and what sort of challenges do you face in that particular age groups? And you have touched upon some of it already, but does some of the things you just mentioned there in terms of, getting really understanding their motivations and who's the one being motivated, does that really help you build a culture, or is there other things that you look at from a different vantage point?
yeah, I think it's it's interesting. I have a unique experience being able to participate in the private school high school environment here, which they play in the fall, and then the public school season, which is in the spring. And originally, I participated in those just because the players at the club where I was working, they didn't really want to play high school. So the administration just had asked, and I thought I would try to help provide a good experience for the players, and it ended up being really a blessing in return, to me because it helped me understand how just maybe the different tools to relate to people better. Um, we think that because we played or because we went about our work in a certain way that that's just how everyone does it, and it's just completely the furthest thing from the truth. Uh, I used to be a very introverted, very, to myself type of person. And when my teammates would be laughing and goofing around, it would drive me absolutely insane. And then I saw Maradona warm up for the World Cup, and I thought, all right, hey, if it's good enough for him, maybe for
He was
some of
free spirited. He was free
yeah,
spirited. Yeah.
so just being able to understand how to relate to certain people, or better yet, maybe even how to recognize that the environment that you've created maybe isn't right for that one kid over there, and you've got to figure out how to get him in, right? So for me, it's the private school has been interesting because you're able to more build a team as far as recruiting and things like that. We have our own limitations, but we are able to try to help bring some kids together. Um, so that's been kind of a nice thing. I also as well really value having alumni involved because I think that that helps with culture. It meant so much for those players to go through it. So for them to be able to create that same type of experience for the next class, I think is important. So I've tried to involve alumni, but really it's been about just trying to share that you love the kids and that you find value in each one, and each one, their profile is different. For me at that age, it's really about player profiling because um, that I feel is where the game has gone with so much more positional play. And I would not be doing my players a service if, when they came to me to play at that level, if after that, the ones that do want to play, if they're done. My job is to try to get them to the next level, or at least put them in the right window to prepare them for that. So I'm just real passionate about that sort of time frame. You and I both have came up, as a 14, 15, 16-year old, and um, our mom or dad or whoever our guardian might have said something to us and we just blew it off, but our coach said the exact same thing and it made us think, right? So I just enjoy being in that space and trying to put together different profiles of players together based on our philosophy of how we'd like to play and our principles, um, and just seeing how we can get through to them, motivate them, and help them be their best. So there's really no secret golden ticket. It's just being adaptable. Like we don't play a certain system. I do not teach to a formation or to a system. We teach to principles. And that means that everyone that comes in our door, as long as they're good enough, we can find value and they can see value in themselves in our program. Um, because if you're saying, well, I play a certain way, well, what if that third center back walks in and you've already made your mind up, right? So you have to adapt to the players that you have, the people that you have. So for me, it's a challenge every year, but it's something that I just love to do to help these guys at this stage of their life where I feel like is some of the most strenuous. So I just enjoy being able to help them maybe see the game differently, develop on the field off the way, and then find, their purpose and their passion. So.
And talk to me about how that's evolved, I guess, in your mindset. You mentioned earlier in our conversation about screens and Instagram followings, and obviously the social media is now it's prevalent to every child growing up now when they get to a certain age, right? Has that or anything else you've seen evolve? Has that become a challenge or an opportunity for you in terms of player development? How do you motivate players who you get in who have got different motivational levels you touched upon as well? What's that look like for you, Chris?
Yeah. I think, to be honest, we are going through some of the growing pains that maybe have existed in other, football infrastructures in the world. And I say that because we have players now that are being recognized at, 13, 14, 15, and they're put up on Instagram accounts. It's become media, right? So that's the media that they turn to, and when they see themselves there, that's something that we never had. So being able to try to help them to get like it's not real. Yeah, so much of what they see online and all that and these reels and it's not real. Like you can have a 5 second clip that goes viral. Your team lost the game. What's more important?
Mm.
And that's I feel like we have to kind of harness that. That's a challenge that I didn't have growing up, playing. I'd be lucky if there was, a couple thousand people at some of our matches at their age. So that I see that as, it's a challenge, but then also too, at 13, 14, 15 years old and you were having yourself promoted because you were doing well and you were working so hard at something, why shouldn't you be rewarded with that? And maybe other opportunities or doors open for you because of that. So I do see the value in it. But I think it's just really being able to take the player and understand the landscape, where it's kind of moving and evolving. Because I think to our point earlier, if you're 13, 14 and you're the best player, but you have a first team environment and you're able to be brought into there, you might have that reel that shows you beating your peers. But when you have that humbling experience of the guy next to you saying, look, bud, no, you've done well there, but this is really it. Like we miss out on that, and the only real place right now where you can have that consistently is high school, unfortunately. Like I have currently on my private school team that we're in season right now, I have 11 freshmen and sophomore on my varsity team. So half my team is very young. But I think that that's what's best for those individuals as they develop over the next 2, 3, 4 years. So, yeah, I just think that I think there's no right pathway. I think it's very a unique time. I've had guys that tried college, it didn't work out. Now they're playing overseas and they're kind of going at it that way. I think like you had mentioned, with the investment with USL, I think people are now looking at, oh, maybe there is an opportunity to have a career. Maybe it doesn't have to be MLS. Maybe it could be the second division, the third division, and so I think things are changing, but I think we are going through growing pains right now where I think it's very important that folks look at how can we help the player get to the next stage. It's not going to look different for each one because otherwise the ones underneath are current players who are 12, 11, 10, 9 that will be able to participate, I believe, in a true football system. I feel like if we can help the ones now transition to that, those dreams of a World Cup, I think we might be able to see them if we can get it right.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue for me talking about World Cup next year. Um, Obviously a lot of investments come into soccer, and there's a few things I wanted to talk about, but we're going to run out of time. But talk to me about your thoughts on the World Cup next year. Obviously, the legacy of the '94 World Cup in the men's side of the game was the MLS. The MLS was formed not long after that. There's been a lot of investment through various different corporate partners into the MLS. USL now is now going to be getting a big chunk of investment by the sounds of things, which I think is a good thing. What sort of legacy do you think the World Cup might leave next year, and how much does that hinge on the US national team doing well? If the US national team were to flop and to have a bad tournament, um, would that impact anything, or do you just think the hype that's around the World Cup, obviously a humongous tournament, how big a deal is that coming to the US? Obviously, Canada and Mexico sharing the rights, but the US is going to hold most of the games.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you see it playing out for US soccer generally, but also how that might influence children as well?
Mm. Well, I do think that I think Pochettino's a great manager. I think that once the players and him kind of are on the same page, I do think that we will be entertaining to watch. I think it'll be enjoyable. Um, Messi just re-signed with MLS, the Miami franchise there. So for 3 years. I think that plays just as much of a part as the World Cup, to be honest. Um, I don't necessarily think having the World Cup will make our competitiveness better. I think what the ripple effect of what it could bring in terms of the infrastructure, hopefully more prevalent promotion relegation, a true um, holding the folks that are in football accountable and responsible for really what the end product is. Because, I mean, that's how it would be in any other profession. So I think if we can get to that, I think that that will be a huge knock-on positive from the World Cup. But I don't think it's like, well, we have the World Cup here, so then the next cycle will be in the final four or the eight or whatever. I don't think so. But I think if in 4 years' time, if in 8 years' time, we're talking about, you know, a proper first division, second division, hopefully a third with promotion, relegation, and the sort of the footprints of that, I think that we will be in a very good place because we've been in a situation where in this country with football, it's we've not been able to be competitive from a club model. We've not been able to really see the full effects of the US market, and that's why you've seen so much of US investment outside of the country. So I think if we have our proper infrastructure here and the investment is here, I think you can potentially go and get the best players from a young age, like you said. Right now, you can't do that at 6, 7, 8, 9 because of pay to play. It's very hard. But I think if you have a proper infrastructure with investment, um, we have the talent. I think that if we can take them and put them in the right environments, I think that that will be the legacy of the World Cup, will be the infrastructure that hopefully comes from it.
Would you say that what would be the best case scenario for you, Chris? Let's fast forward now 10 years. What would be the best case scenario, or and what do you think is possible from that infrastructure improvement, from that legacy from the World Cup, from more children participating? What would you love to see in 10 years' time from your position and your role and just broadly as a US soccer, person?
Sure. I mean, I would just love to be able to walk down the hallway and be able to look at photos of my boys when they were 8, and then the next photo is them at 22 in whatever club they're in, and then the next photo is them of with their family or with whatever, So I want to see that legacy continue. Right now, I feel like I'm fortunate enough to work with kids that a lot of their parents either played or heard of the game, right? So I feel like that next generation, hopefully, that my children will participate in is, well, our parents played and I played, and then now, so I think when you see that and you see more people diving into their communities through the game, um, that's what I would love to see. I would love to see us being able to compete with players in the Champions League consistently, with the US not really being the I feel like we're like the most inefficient uh nation in the world right now in FIFA. But I would love for us to be competitive to the point where, it means something again, where we don't have folks that might choose another country if they're a dual citizen, folks that want to play for the US because we're competitive, not wanting to play for us because that's their way to get into a national team side, So um that's what I would really love to see. I think having more markets with first teams. I mean, how beautiful is it? You can come out of, a match and walk across the road to another one. Here, you've got to get in the train or the car, and you've got to go hours and hours and hours, to your point earlier. So that footy culture, I would just love to participate in that. I was at DC United back when we played at RFK Stadium, and every game, the stands, it would rock and bounce, and it was a party every game. And I want to be a part of that, where kids can go there at 7, 8 years old and dream and then play there. I'm an Arsenal supporter, so what I see going on right now with all the Hale End boys, like that's what I want to see in America.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think it's a good note to finish our conversation here on. I just think I say to people often it's a generational thing. You're seeing more and more. I speak to people who US Americans who are outstanding in their perspective. They're world class in their perspective, and they're very, very strong, and they have expert views. But there is not enough parents who know about the game. So, for example, I give my example, my children who play competitively at a local club, with a coach who's a coach from California who's fantastic. and has just grown up in football. They're the same as us. They are football people. Whereas the parents alongside me, they're not football people, and they're great. They're competitive, and that's the thing I say to people is that generationally, as soon as you get more and more American parents who grew up loving soccer, playing soccer to a good level, coaching it perhaps as well, you're going to see more and more children playing because athletically, the US win. The US win. Goes to the Olympics, the US always win, right? And yes, there's a huge population. They have advantage in that regard, but athletically, no question, they're one of the best in the world.
Well,
Uh,
it's funny you say that because I have my daughter, my oldest daughter is a U11. My youngest is a U6, 7, whatever. He's 6, plays the U8s.
yeah,
And the parents, same thing. I'll have some parents that, oh, we're not winning. We're not, oh, what's this or that? And can they scan? Can they receive? Can they break lines? Can they strike the ball? Can they curl? Can they, like, can they whip it? Can they manipulate it? All good then. Like can they make decisions? Are they brave? Can they battle? When they get knocked down, do they get up? All right. And there are
yeah,
some coaches that I wouldn't say in academy setup, but some of the coaches where it's a dad who just loves the game and he brought out the love that my one of my daughters had in the game just by being that type of coach. So there's a value in it all. And I think as parents, we have to really step back into the development of our child as opposed to the winning and the losing, because that will come if you do it the right
yeah.
way. It's a byproduct. So.
Couldn't agree more. It's interesting because I've been in the game for 20 years now, different levels, and my daughters, two daughters, one daughter's playing up, the other daughter's at the right level. Capacity for the first season this year here in Tampa, and they've played five, lost five. And so they are bottom of their table right now. They're a young team, they're bottom of the table, new team, very young team. I couldn't be happier, Chris. I couldn't be
Mm.
happier because the environment they are in, and we tried out for a bunch of clubs. We're lucky Tampa's quite a buoyant area for soccer. But I have a bunch of clubs and we met a bunch of coaches, and I've probably got a slightly different vantage point. I'm probably asking questions that maybe some parents aren't asking because just for my background experience. And I know we're in the right place. So I'm
Mm.
very happy. And it sounds mad because our parents, not because they're trying to gun to win, because they understand it's player development too. But for me, I'm actually really happy. And I'm saying to our coach, he's saying we need to the morale of the girls is going to drop, and I need to make sure the parents that we're doing the right things. And I say, look, from my point of view, you're doing the perfect thing. Just keep doing what you're doing. And the girls are learning so much right now. And it goes back to that education piece. And there's an education to be had from losing. I want the kids to feel a little bit sore about losing because I think that's a normal thing. It builds their resilience. So all the other things they're doing in the right way is going to help them bounce back and build their education out, which is going to be, 10 years. It's not a one season thing. So it's really interesting. Chris, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so, so much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. I love speaking to people on a level who just love the game, but have a love for the play development side of it too, like yourself. So thank you so, so much for your time, Chris. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thanks, Andy.